Welcome to the skunk, mink, and otter video. What is the difference between a mink and an otter? Is there more than one type of skunk in Pennsylvania? Let's tune in to Ranger Mullen to find out more.
So this is the Mustelidae family in Pennsylvania minus the fisher. Unfortunately, we do not have a fisher pelt to show you today. So we have three mink, one that is typical, one that is very light because of exposure to the sunlight since it's been in this form, and a fully mounted mink to show you what an animal in the wild would look like. To the left here we have a striped skunk as opposed to the spotted skunk, which we have in Pennsylvania, just not a lot of, and it's also not very, it's not spread out over a large area of Pennsylvania, just the southwest corner for the most part. And then of course our river otter. This is the Mustelidae family. So we're going to start off with mink. In Pennsylvania, mink are everywhere. They are a wetland animal. They're typically found along streams, edges of ponds and lakes, and this is typical of mink. And I want to let you know that typical means there could be individual variations, so you might encounter a mink that doesn't look like this. It might look like this. This mink has been a skin for a long time and simply has faded due to sunlight exposure. This is a more natural color of mink, this rich chocolate brown. Length is typical, along with the tail, which typically gets darker towards the end. Diagnostic for me, for mink, is right under the chin. There's a white spot, we call this a bib. If you have an animal of this dark brown color, of that size, with that bib, I promise you we're looking at a mink. Mink is a predator. They will go after animals larger than they'll go after animals smaller. They'll hunt the land and the water, which is unique to the Mustelidae family, of which mink is a member. The skull of the mink shows very clearly that this animal is a predator. And you can tell that by the very large canines, as well as the pointed molars. These teeth were designed to rip and tear meat. And one of the features that you can look at when you're talking about the mink's skull is the close set of the front teeth, as well as a small cranial ridge here at the back of the skull. Those are things that will help you identify this animal as mink. So again, the mink is a predator extraordinaire. We're actually kind of happy that he's this size, because if he were much bigger, we might be on the menu. This guy often will be in your chicken coop. Most people blame red foxes. If you've got soft mud around your coop, be looking for mink footprints, which we'll go over here in a little bit. Especially the wetland areas, edges of ponds, to the ponds, edges of streams. They will hunt on land and in water, so you might actually see them swimming. Our next member of the Mustelidae family is going to be the river otter. This is the largest Mustelidae species in the state, closely followed by the fisher. Otters are animals that spend almost all of their time in water. They eat all kinds of fish, freshwater mollusks, and almost anything that lives in or near the water. They will come out of the water to play and to look for things to eat, but most of their time is in the water. Again, these animals are predators. And you can see the large canine teeth. It's a much larger skull with a very pronounced cranial ridge. Okay, so I want to point out the tail of the otter. It's very long. In some specimens, you might find that the tail almost doubles the overall length of the fur, of the pelt. And the tail is used to help them navigate through the water. It acts as a rudder, helps them be acrobatic, if you will, in the water. The feet are not webbed. They are well clawed, again, because this is a predator. And the fur is coated with an oil that's produced by a pair of glands, again, at the base of the tail. This is a part of the Mustelidae family. All Mustelidae have those paired glands at the base of their tail. It's just the skunk that's able to squirt that material out. He doesn't do that, but he does comb his fur, and that helps it be water repellent, helps them to stay warm in the water, and a neat little adaptation for them in their aquatic habits. This otter has been mounted and in a display case or display area here at the parks for a very long time. And so as you can see, his coat is rather faded. They are typically a very dark brown, similar to the mink fur that we saw earlier. And they can be found, again, all over the state. There was a time in Pennsylvania's history when otters were nearly extinct from Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Game Commission took efforts to reintroduce otters into various watersheds of the Commonwealth, and now they can be found all over the state. And if you're fortunate, if you're walking the streams and not making a bunch of noise, and you're in otter areas, you might actually get an eyeball on one of these guys. They're pretty quick. They can spend a lot of time underwater. So it's kind of a matter of being in the right place at the right time. So the next family member of the Mustelidae is the skunk, which most people refer to when they see this animal with this pattern. But I need you to know that in the Envirothon, particularly when you're taking your test, oftentimes you need to be very species specific. So if the question is asking you about foxes and the answer is gray fox, well, the answer of fox would be wrong because you have to specify which of the foxes. So you need to know that this is a striped skunk. The striped skunk has typically a black and white pattern. It can vary from this. It can be more black. It can be more white. It can be almost all white or all black with very little of the other color. The other skunk that we have in Pennsylvania, though we don't have an example of that here, is the spotted skunk. Spotted skunk is typically limited to the southwest corner of the state, Greene County, Fayette County, just above West Virginia. The skunk is different in the Mustelidae family in that it is not classified as a predator. It is more of an insectivore. It is also very opportunistic, so he might be in your garbage or eating your pet's foods if you leave your pet outside. Of course, the most notable thing about the skunk is his smell. All members of the Mustelidae family, which include the mink, the skunk, the otter, the fisher, and weasels, they have a very potent, very strong oil-producing glands at the base of the tail. The skunk has the ability to shoot this oily material and really do use some nastiness. It really works well for a defense. And I want you to think about this a little bit. To our nose, the skunk smells bad. To a predator's nose that might want to eat the skunk, say like a canine, a fox or a coyote, their sense of smell can be hundreds of times what our sense of smell is. And so to them, I would think that it's almost painful to smell a skunk. And to get that stuff on them, very effective at keeping them safe from predators. One of their favorite foods is beetle grubs. So if in the summer months you have skunks visiting your backyard, you probably have a lot of grubs in your yard. And the way you can determine that is with a shovel, you flip over a little clod of grass, and you look at the dirt you exposed, and you look at the bottom side of that clod of grass that you flipped over, and if you have 3 or 4 grubs, you have a lot of grubs in your yard. And if you want to get rid of the skunks, you need to get rid of the grubs. Or you can let the skunks do that for you. We'll redo that. You can let the skunks do that for you, and it won't cost you at least money for the grub aside that you'd be purchasing. Striped skunk. About 20 feet is how far you need to be from that skunk if he should decide to spray in your direction. So the way to avoid being sprayed is to move quietly and slowly around the skunk. No sudden moves, no loud noises, and you should be able to get away just fine. So with the skunk skull, again, you have sizable canine teeth, though not as large as the mink. You also have a cranial ridge, but much much less than that of the mink, which is going to help you determine the difference between the two, and just the general shape and size of the skull. When you compare them, you can see differences, and it's kind of like the devil in the details. You have to be able to look at them both to sometimes learn how one differs from the other. Absolutely. Let's bring that mink skull in here. So I'm going to place these here on the table so that you can see them side by side, and you can see some of the differences. The orbital processes on the mink skull are much longer and flare to the sides more than on the skunk. And you can see that overall difference, a narrowness to the top of the cranium versus that of the skunk. And it's those tiny small details that are going to make a difference in you getting the correct identification.